both. I mean, Puerto Rico is a part of America, so yeah.
I would consider myself more Puerto Rican than American for certain reasons, but I also consider myself a good American.
Puerto Rican 100%. Okay.
I consider myself to be American, Puerto Rican American. I served the Marine Corps 12 years of my life. Served my country, God and country, America, Puerto Rico, one.
I consider myself both.
Okay.
Because my parents were born in Puerto Rico and I was born here. So I'm considered New Rican.
Yeah.
So I'm both American, Puerto Rican, American.
Actually American, born and raised here.
Okay.
But recently I just went over there for the first time.
Wow.
I'm saying American.
All the way to 1948. Every governor that was selected in Puerto Rico was a military. Intentions for Puerto Rico.
The 4-Acre Act
also known as the Organic Act, was enacted on April 12, 1900. It forced citizenship on the people of Puerto Rico. Whether you wanted to be a citizen of the United States or not, did not Acre Act.
Before United States invades Puerto Rico enjoyed the experience of a mixed crop economy, meaning the economy of Puerto Rico was in good shape. We grew every consumable item that we needed in the island. There was a relationship between what we needed to consume and what was being produced in the island. Rico.
When you say defend themselves, what do you feel like you need to defend yourselves against?
Well, colonialism. Colonialism is a violent, inhumane system, right? It pits people against each other. It does not allow a country to develop fully, and it's maintained based on continuous repression, physical repression, cultural repression, ideological repressions in every form. And so, Puerto Ricans need to be organized and defend themselves, and ensure that their culture, their spirit moves forward.
So the Commonwealth status is what has brought us to where we are today. 73 billion in debt, 16% unemployment and rising, 42% live below the poverty line and rising, 100 schools have closed, teachers are unemployed, children have nowhere to go. And this is maintaining the current status.
Everything going in and out of Puerto Rico has to be shipped in U.S. cargo ships. So in the world market, Panama has one of the cheapest shipping companies, right, in terms of the cost. So if Puerto Rico needs to import something from, let's say, Argentina or Brazil, it can't hire a Panamanian ship to go to Brazil, pick up the goods, and bring it straight to Puerto Rico. It would have to first go to the mainland of the United States, transfer to a U.S. flagship, and then go to Puerto Rico, which increases the cost of living in Puerto Rico.
Government has become the biggest game in town in Puerto Rico, but there's a reason for that, and that's because the public sector has completely dominated the economy. There is no private economy. There is no industry. The United States has specifically prohibited Puerto Rico from developing its own shipping industry because the Jones Act enables all foreign registry vessels have severely, steeply graduated excise taxes, fees, duties, the net effect of which almost doubles the prices of many of those products, those foreign products in Puerto Rico, and provides an artificial price support for U.S. products. 85% of Puerto Rican consumption on the island is U.S. products. Puerto Rico is the fourth largest market in the world for U.S. products. There's more Walgreens per square mile and Walmarts per square mile than in the United States, and more Walmarts per square mile than in the entire planet in Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico is 85% of the foodstuffs come from the outside. It's not being produced on the island. And I can frankly say that the United States has caused the complete dismantling of the Puerto Rico's agriculture. The ones who destroyed it completely was the United States and its policies in Puerto Rico. Well, because after the agriculture was dismantled in Puerto Rico, then in the 1950s, United States went into another phase of changing the economy of Puerto Rico from a monoculture sugar production company and some tobacco, not too much, to industrialization, okay? And it's in the Operation Bootstrap is the name of this economic plan, which under Luis Muñoz Marin, Governor Luis Muñoz Marin, which was the first elected governor of Puerto Rico in the 50s. So, mind you, from 1898 to 1950s, Puerto Rico was ruled by U.S. military governors chosen by the President of the United States, and it's not until the 1950s that they are, and I put it on the quotes, democratic elections where Luis Muñoz Marin is elected as the governor of Puerto Rico. Under Luis Muñoz Marin, he makes an agreement with the United States of this Operation Bootstrap, which was really the industrialization of Puerto Rico. Supposedly, it was supposed to provide a lot of jobs to the Puerto Rican people, but what happened was the mass migration, the exodus of the Puerto Rican people, because those manufacturing jobs were not enough and sufficient for the labor force that existed in Puerto Rico, which were mainly manual laborers. And it caused 1/3 of the Puerto Rican people to be pushed out of Puerto Rico. So
Puerto Ricans in particular that live in the United States are very uneducated about the crisis in Puerto Rico. They are very uneducated about the atrocities that have occurred since 1898 when the United States first landed in Puerto Rico. They are unaware of the gag law, where it was illegal to fly the flag, when it was illegal to talk about independence for Puerto Rico, and if you did, you were thrown in jail. They were uninformed about the sterilization of Puerto Rican women throughout the island in the 60s and 70s and even into the 80s. So many Puerto Ricans are unaware of the massacres and the uprisings that occurred in the 1930s and the 1940s. So the Puerto Ricans that grew up in this country, in the United States, are simply unaware of what has happened and what their history. You know, they are worried about the day-to-day. They're growing up with American cultures and American ideas and so on. And not that it's a terrible thing, but it's most important to remember who you are and where you come from. You know, the Puerto Ricans that live here in the United States are basically, Puerto Ricans are becoming extinct, basically, because we are losing our language, we are losing our culture. we are losing our history, and we are forgetting who we are because we are just simply adapting the American way of life.
Yo no me crié allá.
Okay. All right, true or
I don't know too much about Puerto Rico.
Oh.
Okay, the gag law was everything's quiet, right? But I never really looked into it, so I really don't know what's that about.
All right, what was the gag law? You know what the colors of the flag mean?
At this time, negative. Not to the American government anyway.
Okay. That's false.
Wow.
I'll take it.
That's crazy.
Wow.
Gag law, I have no idea about Puerto Rican history too much.
Okay, all
I
right.
don't know what the gag law is.
True or false? 40% of all women in Puerto Rico between 1950 and 1960s were sterilized without their knowledge or consent.
If I don't know, then I just say I don't know.
Yep. Okay.
Maybe it's true. Maybe. No, but
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
it's possibly true. I don't know.
In Puerto Rico, in fact, there was, in 1973, there was a mention of that in the United Nations, that the sterilization plan in Puerto Rico was really a plan of genocide against the Puerto Rican people, and that genocide is a violation of the UN
What happened in Vieques is that in the 1940s, the U.S. government decided that there needed to be a Pearl Harbor in the Caribbean. So they invaded Vieques and set up on both sides of the island, which is, again, a small island municipality off the coast of Puerto Rico. I think just for the geography lesson, people forget that Puerto Rico is an archipelago and has small little islands next to it, primarily Culebra and Vieques. Culebra had been, for many decades already, been a military bastion for the United States. So Vieques became the new kind of area that they were going to populate. And they set up a whole system of military bases, and they were going to start military practices. And of course they wanted to depopulate the island. They wanted to move the population either to the mainland of Puerto Rico, or when this happened voluntarily, well, kind of voluntarily, but many people started going into to St. Croix and some of the Virgin Islands. World War II ended. So the Caribbean Pearl Harbor was never finished. There was really no reason for them to stay there until they invented the idea of, well, if we have military bases there, why don't we start making military maneuvers, practicing military maneuvers there. So forcibly relocated a lot of the population, took lands that did not belong to them, and created the situation in which the people of Vieques were sandwiched in to 35% of the island, while 65% of it was taken over by the military. One sector of it was primarily kind of used for storage and weapons, warehousing and depositories for weapons, while the other side that they used was for active military bombing. So
we turn now to Vieques, the tiny island off the eastern coast of Puerto Rico, where thousands are commemorating the 10th anniversary of when the U.S. Navy stopped using their island as a bombing range. Since the 1940s, the Navy used nearly 3/4 of the island for bombing practice, war games, and dumping of old munitions. Resistance to the bombing reached a turning point in 1999 when a Marine pilot missed his target and dropped two 500-pound bombs that killed a civilian security guard. A campaign of nonviolent civil disobedience eventually forced the Navy to close the facility.
Well, if we look at American history, that's what forcible relocation is, something that it has always been as American as apple pie, racism, and colonialization. I mean, moving a population of people for military purposes, that's how military bases have been formed throughout the United States, around the world. I mean, this country's government has a long history of forcible relocations. You can talk to various Native American groups about that. You can talk to various populations of people all over the world. They did it in Puerto Rico. When they invaded Puerto Rico on July 25th, one of the first things they started doing was setting up a military command there. And throughout the decades, they've created military bases throughout the island where they have forcibly moved populations of people left and right. And people think that this doesn't happen. And again, I tell people, take your child's U.S. history book and look through it, and you'll see that forcible relocation and this type of colonization and imperialism is very American.
Vieques still is economically depressed. There's still technically no real hospital in Vieques. If you have cancer or heavy metal poisoning, you are going to the mainland to get treatment. Hospitals and those types of services for many years in Vieques were not given the ability to be developed because they were so reliant on the military. If you got sick, you could go to the military hospital, you could go to the base hospital. But primarily, that's if you worked for the military. If you didn't, if you were a civilian that wasn't employed, you had to make your way to Fajardo. You had to make your way to the main island. You had to get up in the morning, get on a ferry, go to the mainland, get your medicine, get your treatments, get your chemotherapy, your radiation, or whatever treatments you were getting for your heavy metal poisoning done there, and then make your way back. To this day, people are creating projects to help people who have the cancer and have the heavy metal poisoning, but there's still inadequate healthcare. Where's the hospital in Vieques? Where, something other than just urgent care, something other than just, clinics don't exist.
There was a study by Dr. Jorge Colon of the University of Puerto Rico that was based on hair samples of the people of Vieques. He found 34% of the population, about a third, had toxic levels of mercury, 55% contaminated with lead, 69% with arsenic, 69% with cadmium, 90% with aluminum and antimony, whose toxic effects are similar to arsenic poisoning. These are all substances found in the ordinances used in the island.
We run a picture of an undetonated bomb that was found by fishermen recently in 80 feet of water off of Vieques. The military says it spent already about $180 million, the most expensive cleanup in its history, but yet so much of the waters are still contaminated with all of these unexploded munitions. Your sense of how that cleanup has been going?
I would suggest that most of that, almost $200 million, has ended up in the bank accounts of large U.S. corporations hired by the Navy to do the cleanup. While the cleanup has taken over 10 years so far, they're only scratching the surface. This is a process that we believe is happening with no real supervision, no genuine community participation. We believe the military is really not interested in cleaning up Vieques, and rather interested in continuing to punish Vieques for having thrown the U.S. Navy out in 2003. So we need to continue to pressure and get the support from congressmen like Congressman Serrano, Nidia Velázquez, and Luis Gutierrez, and now also Congressman Alan Grayson from Florida have taken up this issue to help push the federal government to be responsible for the ecological destruction done on Vieques, as well as helping with the severe health crisis that resulted from these from military toxics.
Melvin Van Peebles said that trouble is nothing but opportunity in work clothes. So, you know, this is a troubled time right now, but it's a real opportunity for Puerto Rico right now, because it's not going to have this platform again, to recalibrate not just the debt, because if you just do that, the problems will remain. We have to re-examine this relationship, because there's a status relationship between the U.S. and Puerto Rico that's creating this problem. Puerto Rico can't continue like this mistress in this Caribbean. The Commonwealth status doesn't work. It's become manifestly dysfunctional to both sides. It's not working here. If Puerto Rico can't pay the $73 billion and pension funds start becoming shaky all over the country. So clearly, if we just do quarterly, as some people call it, quarterly capitalism, which is you just look at what's good for the corporation for the next quarter, these corporations, they're going to insist on payment. They're going to insist on no bankruptcy protections. They just want to get their money, the money. They don't care, and you don't expect them to, because that's not their job. Their job is to maximize revenue for the shareholders and for themselves, and to bring home a Christmas bonus for the family. It's not the United States of America, it's the United Sociopaths of America that Puerto Rico is dealing with. So we have to get beyond that model, because and use this opportunity to have the United States see the larger picture involved, a holistic relationship that needs to be changed, because if not, it's just going to happen and it's going to get worse. Debt service on that $73 billion alone, which will be about $7 billion a year. If you do the math, you divide 3.5 million Puerto Ricans into $7 billion. That's $2,000 for every man, woman, and child in Puerto Rico. They're going to be paying $2,000 per person just to pay the interest on this $73 billion debt, which shouldn't have existed in the first place. And these are for people that have $16,400 per capita, which is 25% less than Mississippi, the poorest state in the Union. Puerto Rico was a colony. It's been kept as a colony, and now they're trying to squeeze the last blood out of it. And that's actually what they want, from economically and politically. Because economically, you have Act 22, which gives a 20-year tax exemption to interest, dividend, and capital gains income to high net worth individuals such as John Paulson, who made $15 billion for his hedge fund betting against the American economy in 2007. So this predatory lender is going to Puerto Rico to do the same thing, buying up distressed assets for pennies on the dollar like he did 8 years ago. He's basically profiting from the misery of others, but now the misery is in Puerto Rico. That's the kind of person that's being encouraged to go to Puerto Rico, while 400,000 Puerto Ricans are leaving. So the economic sector, they love this. They also love triple tax exempt bonds, because the yield on that is about 10% per year, and when you factor in the triple tax exemption, it becomes 18% per year. So economically, Puerto Rico is exactly where the economic elites in the United States want it to be. Politically, it's where they want it to be too, because people talk about statehood, this and that. Statehood isn't going to happen. There's no 5 congressmen are not going to give up their seats so that 5 Puerto Rican congressmen can come in. But Congress is a zero-sum game. It's a 435 seats. You can't just add 5 seats. Someone's going to have to lose 5 seats. Senate is a different matter. You can have 102 senators. So Congress is not going to allow, they're just not going to give up 5 seats, especially 5 Democratic seats when Republicans are going to oppose it. So politically and economically, Puerto Rico is in a real mess. The U.S. isn't interested in the birds, just the bird cage. So there's no interest. There's no human interests. Even now, certainly 100 years ago, just people wouldn't know what's going on in Puerto Rico. There was no television or radio, or at least radio coming this way, no internet. Puerto Rico was separated by a language, culture, 1,500 miles of ocean, technology. So what happened, it's not like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happened in Puerto Rico never happened at all. So the second thing that Albizu, of the many, is that Puerto Rico only registers on the Puerto Rican awareness, U.S. awareness, when Puerto Rico becomes a big problem. And so right now, because Puerto Rico allegedly owes a bunch of money, is why you have the United States paying attention. Otherwise, it wouldn't be paying attention. So Street asked for, when people started moving away off the island because they just couldn't afford to live there anymore, there's been a net out-migration of about 10% of the population, from 4 million to 3.6 million over the last 15 years. So the Wall Street services, they still want to get the hedge fund guys, these John Paulson types, they want to get the profits out. So they want to get 100% of the profits from the 90% of the people that are left on the island. So they tell 2 successive administrations that they have to inflict fiscal austerities, or else they're going to downgrade the debt to junk bond status. So for 2 successive administrations did precisely that. They raised water rates 67%. The electricity went up to 29 cents per kilowatt hour. They raised gasoline taxes twice in 1 year. They raised property taxes, small business taxes. They rolled back teacher pensions. They just enacted an 11.5% sales tax. They closed 200 schools. I mean, they made Puerto Rico really unlivable in order to comply with the demands of the Wall Street rating service. So they put Puerto Rico against the wall now, and there's no Chapter 9 bankruptcy protection. So what you're getting, if this is allowed to continue, you're going to have the gentrification of an entire island, because people are going to continue moving out, the tax base will keep shrinking, the remaining people will have to pay even more taxes, and it's going to be what Governor Padilla called a downward spiral. Meanwhile, you got people like Paulson coming in, buying up all these distressed assets for pennies on the dollar, and that's where your gentrification will come in. In the next 20 years, if this doesn't change, Puerto Rico won't be the same as we know it. And that's why Puerto Rico needs to make a move right now and get independent as soon as possible.
Since the making of this film, the Promesa Bill, the Puerto Rico Oversight Management Act, was created and signed by President Obama. The bill promised the following: the minimum wage for all adults aged 18 to 24 will be lowered to $4.25 per hour. Schools, hospitals, and public service agencies will continue to close and leave residents without education, health care, and a means to survive. Pensions can be frozen and or cut to repay the debt. A financial control board will be elected, none of whom need to live on the island. The financial control board is able to meet in secret and disperse the island's finances however they see fit. They are also not obligated to disclose any of this information to the island's residents. The Financial Control Board can accept gifts from outside corporations, opening the door for further corruption. All decisions made by the Control Board are final, and finally, the Control Board has legal immunity from lawsuits by the citizens of Puerto Rico.
Thank you so much. Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to the rule and to the underlying bill. I submitted 10 amendments for consideration. Not one of them, not one of my amendments was ruled in order to be debated today by my colleagues. But I don't oppose the bill because I didn't get an amendment in here. The fact that my amendments were deemed unsuitable for debate by the Congress of the United States is an indication of the underlying problems with the bill. If you can't debate the future of Puerto Rico here in the Congress of the United States, imagine when you give it to 7 people unelected by anyone here in Puerto Rico or in the United States that can meet in secret. They can meet in secret without informing us of any one of their decisions. If we can't have a debate about Puerto Rico, if it's so important, why not take time to have a debate about the amendments that are offered by people here? We're engaged today in a wholly undemocratic activity in the world's greatest democracy. We're debating how we will take power from the people who are virtually powerless already. As I have said throughout this debate, Puerto Rico, by virtue of court cases and the territorial clause of the Constitution, belongs to, but is not a part of the United States. I say to all of my colleagues, treat them with dignity, with respect. Do not put blinders on as though they do not exist. Yes, the territorial clause of the Constitution of the United States says that they are territory and that therefore they are property of the United States of America. But I submit to each and every one of you that they are live human beings with hearts, with souls, and should demand and receive the respect that any other human. Don't treat them like a piece of trash. Don't treat them like an inanimate object that has no right to dignity and to respect, which is what we are doing here today. I cannot vote for this. You know, President Obama referred to the special place that Kenya owns in his heart, because he says, it will always be a special place because that is the place of the birth of my father, he says. Let me submit to you, Puerto Rico is the place of the birth of my father. And I cannot come here and turn my back on the place of the birth of my father with this outrageously undemocratic and this outrageously unfair proposal to the people of Puerto Rico. Think about it. You are imposing a junta, because that's what they're calling it. There will be no difference between this junta and the junta of Pinochet in Chile, as far as the international community is concerned. And why? Because yesterday, and the Speaker of the House of Puerto Rico is in the gallery, they approved a resolution rejecting this junta, elected by the people of Puerto Rico. And what does the Congress of the United States, the democracy of the world, say? We don't care. Today, as we speak, the Senate in Puerto Rico has a resolution rejecting. And just this past Sunday, every candidate for governor in Puerto Rico, every last candidate for governor in Puerto Rico that was successful, had in their platform a rejection of promesa. How many times do the people of Puerto Rico have to reject this proposal so that the Congress of the United States treats them with some respect and some dignity? And I just want to say, control board? When's the last control board we know so much about? Flint, Michigan. And what did the control board do? They poisoned the people, American citizens in Flint. And let me suggest to you that if you give power to a control board unelected and unsupervised by anyone here, be careful. Be careful. Remember Flint. Remember the poisoning of the people, what the control board did there. That is exactly what we should suspect will happen unless we put. People say, oh, Luis, but what's your alternative? Our alternative is quite simple. Have a conversation. Not a conversation that begins, we will not spend a penny on the people of Puerto Rico. That's the way our conversation will be. We will not. You have to show me a solution in which we do not spend a penny. Well, let me tell you, we spend money. The Jones Act imposed on the people of Puerto Rico, the most expensive merchant marines in the world, imposed on the people, cost $500 million a year. Why don't we lift that from them? We believe in democracy. We believe they should be free. Why don't we lift that from them? Medicaid and Medicare? You seen the reimbursement schedules to Puerto Rico? They pay the same in FICA taxes, but don't receive the same in terms of reimbursement.
The second piece of legislation relates to the crisis that we're seeing in Puerto Rico. We've got millions of our fellow citizens in Puerto Rico who've been suffering under one of the worst financial crises, fiscal crises, in memory. And as a consequence of the inability for them to restructure their debt, you've seen hospitals unable to operate, ambulances shutting down, basic services shutting down, and government workers not being paid. It has brought enormous hardship to Puerto Rico. Through some amazing work by our Treasury Department, our legislative staff, and a bipartisan effort in both the House and the Senate, we finally have legislation that at least is going to give Puerto Rico the capacity, the opportunity to get out from under this lingering uncertainty with respect to their debt, to start stabilizing government services and to start growing again. It's not in and of itself going to be sufficient to solve all the problems that Puerto Rico faces, but it is an important first step on the path of creating more stability, better services, and greater prosperity over the long term for the people of Puerto Rico. So I want to thank all four leaders in Congress for the hard work in getting this to my desk, and I want to let the people of Puerto Rico know that although there's still some tough work that we're going to have to do to dig Puerto Rico out of the hole that it's in, this indicates how committed my administration is to making sure that they get the help they need. And it's not going to stop here. We've got to keep on working to figure out how we promote the long-term growth and sustainability that's so desperately needed down there. But the people of Puerto Rico need to know that they're not forgotten, that they're part of the American family, and Congress's responsiveness to this issue, even though this is not a perfect bill, at least moves us in the right direction.
Despierta, borinqueño, te han dado la señal. Despierta de ese sueño que es hora de luchar. A ese llamar patriótico, no arde tu corazón. Ven, no será simpático el ruido del cañón. Nosotros queremos la libertad, nuestro machete nos la dará. Vámonos, borinqueños, vámonos ya, que nos espera ansiosa la libertad. La